Question 1. Operational review demonstrates that a shipment of chemicals has arrived with incomplete documentation regarding its hazardous classification and disposal protocols. The immediate deadline for onward delivery of this shipment is approaching. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Contact the supplier for verbal confirmation of the hazardous classification and proceed with delivery based on that assurance. Option B. Proceed with the onward delivery, assuming the supplier has provided accurate information, and address any documentation gaps post-delivery. Option C. Immediately dispose of the shipment as general waste to avoid delays and potential compliance issues without further investigation. Option D. Halt all operations involving the shipment until complete and verified documentation is obtained and reviewed, and initiate an internal investigation into the discrepancy. Correct answer is D. Halt all operations involving the shipment until complete and verified documentation is obtained and reviewed, and initiate an internal investigation into the discrepancy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning the handling and reporting of hazardous materials. Mismanagement in this area can lead to significant legal penalties, environmental damage, and reputational harm. The pressure to meet delivery targets can create a temptation to overlook or expedite compliance procedures, making careful judgment and a robust understanding of regulatory requirements paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately halting operations involving the suspect material and initiating a formal investigation in accordance with established company policy and relevant regulatory guidelines. This demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing safety and compliance over immediate operational throughput. It aligns with the principle of innocent until proven guilty for the material itself, but mandates a precautionary approach until its status is confirmed. This proactive stance ensures that any potential risks are identified and mitigated before they can cause harm or violate regulations. It also reflects a commitment to a culture of compliance, where regulatory adherence is non-negotiable. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to continue operations while initiating a review, assuming the material is likely compliant. This is a regulatory failure because it violates the precautionary principle inherent in hazardous materials management. Regulations typically require confirmation of compliance before use or transport, not concurrently. It also creates an ethical failure by potentially exposing employees, the public, and the environment to unknown risks. Another incorrect approach is to dispose of the material immediately without proper documentation or investigation. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it prevents proper tracking and reporting, which are critical components of hazardous waste management and environmental protection laws. It also constitutes an ethical failure by potentially concealing a compliance issue and avoiding accountability. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the supplier's verbal assurance of compliance without independent verification or documentation. This is a regulatory failure because it outsources critical compliance responsibilities without due diligence. Regulations often place the onus on the receiving party to ensure compliance, especially for potentially hazardous substances. It is also an ethical failure as it demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and due care. Professional reasoning. Professionals in logistics and supply chain management must adopt a systematic approach to regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the specific regulations applicable to their operations, e.g., environmental protection laws, transportation of dangerous goods regulations, establishing clear internal policies and procedures, and fostering a culture where compliance is integrated into daily operations. When faced with uncertainty, the decision-making process should prioritize risk assessment, adherence to established protocols, and seeking expert guidance if necessary. The default position should always be to err on the side of caution and ensure full compliance before proceeding with any activity that could have regulatory implications. Question 2. Operational review demonstrates a potential unauthorized access to a customer database managed by a third-party logistics provider, raising concerns about a data privacy breach. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for GXO logistics? Option A. Immediately instruct the third-party provider to cease all data processing activities and initiate a formal internal investigation involving the data protection officer and legal counsel. Option B. Advise the third-party provider to implement enhanced security measures and monitor their systems for further suspicious activity, deferring internal reporting until a definitive breach is confirmed. Option C. Assume the incident is a minor technical glitch and instruct the operational team to resolve it without involving compliance or legal departments. Option D. Directly contact affected customers to inform them of the potential breach and offer mitigation services, while simultaneously investigating the incident internally. The correct answer is A. Immediately instruct the third-party provider to cease all data processing activities and initiate a formal internal investigation involving the data protection officer and legal counsel. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The need to quickly address a potential breach of data privacy regulation, specifically concerning customer information handled by a third-party logistics provider, requires immediate and decisive action. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the situation with the need for thorough investigation and adherence to established protocols, ensuring that any corrective actions are both effective and legally sound. Missteps could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, multifaceted response that prioritizes immediate containment, thorough investigation, and transparent communication, all within the bounds of relevant data protection laws. This aligns with best professional practice by demonstrating a commitment to safeguarding sensitive information and upholding legal obligations. Specifically, it involves 1. Immediate notification to the Data Protection Officer, DPO, and legal counsel. This ensures that the appropriate internal stakeholders are alerted to a potential data breach, allowing for expert guidance on legal and regulatory requirements. This is crucial under data protection frameworks like GDPR, if applicable to the exam jurisdiction, which mandate timely reporting of breaches. 2. Initiating an internal investigation. This systematic process aims to ascertain the nature, scope, and impact of the potential breach. It involves gathering evidence, interviewing relevant personnel, and assessing the security measures in place. This proactive investigation is a cornerstone of responsible data stewardship and helps in understanding the root cause. 3. Assessing the risk to individuals. A critical step is to evaluate the potential harm to the affected individuals whose data may have been compromised. This assessment informs subsequent actions, including notification requirements. Developing a remediation plan. Based on the investigation findings, a plan to rectify the situation and prevent future occurrences is essential. This might include enhancing security protocols, retraining staff, or revising third-party agreements. 5. Considering regulatory notification obligations. Depending on the severity and nature of the breach, there may be a legal requirement to notify the relevant supervisory authority or the affected individuals. This is a direct reflection of compliance with data protection legislation. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on immediate operational fixes without involving legal and data protection experts is professionally unacceptable. For instance, simply instructing the third-party provider to cease operations without a proper investigation or understanding of the breach's scope could be an overreaction, potentially causing unnecessary business disruption and failing to address the root cause. This approach neglects the regulatory imperative to investigate and report data breaches appropriately. Another incorrect approach would be to delay reporting the potential breach internally or to relevant authorities while attempting to resolve it solely at an operational level. This failure to promptly engage with legal and DPO functions constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. Data protection laws often have strict timelines for reporting breaches, and delays can result in increased penalties and a perception of non-compliance and a lack of accountability. A third incorrect approach might be to dismiss the incident as a minor operational issue without a thorough risk assessment. This demonstrates a disregard for the potential impact on individuals and a failure to comply with the principles of data minimization and security by design, which are fundamental to data protection regulations. It overlooks the ethical responsibility to protect personal data. Professional reasoning. Professionals in logistics and supply chain management must adopt a proactive and risk-aware approach to regulatory compliance. When faced with a potential data breach, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate escalation. Recognize the seriousness of potential data privacy issues and escalate to designated compliance officers, like the DPO and legal counsel, without delay. 2. Information gathering. Support and participate in a thorough, objective investigation to understand the facts of the situation. 3. Risk assessment. Actively contribute to assessing the potential harm to individuals and the business. 4. Collaborative solution development. Work with compliance, legal, and IT teams to develop and implement effective remediation strategies. 5. Adherence to reporting protocols. Understand and follow established procedures for internal and external reporting of incidents, ensuring timely and accurate communication. This structured approach ensures that all legal, ethical, and operational considerations are addressed, leading to a robust and compliant resolution. Question 3. The efficiency study reveals that current inventory tracking procedures may be contributing to a slight delay in real-time stock updates, potentially impacting order fulfillment times. While the study suggests a shortcut in the data logging process that could speed up updates, it does not explicitly address whether this shortcut aligns with GXO logistics, established data integrity protocols, or any specific regulatory reporting requirements for inventory accuracy. What is the most appropriate next step for the logistics manager? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of the proposed data logging shortcut against GXO logistics internal data integrity policies and any applicable regulatory guidelines to ensure compliance before considering implementation. Option B. Immediately implement the proposed data logging shortcut to improve real-time stock updates and address potential order fulfillment delays, assuming the efficiency gains outweigh minor data discrepancies. Option C. Proceed with the shortcut, but instruct the team to manually cross-reference data logs at the end of each shift to mitigate any potential inaccuracies. Option D. Inform the efficiency study team that their recommendations cannot be implemented due to potential regulatory risks, without further investigation into the specifics of the proposed shortcut. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of the proposed data logging shortcut against GXO logistics internal data integrity policies and any applicable regulatory guidelines to ensure compliance before considering implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data handling and reporting within the logistics sector. The pressure to meet efficiency targets can create a temptation to cut corners, which could lead to regulatory breaches. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed efficiency improvements do not compromise the integrity of data or violate reporting obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough review of existing processes against the GXO logistics internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks before implementing any changes. This proactive stance ensures that efficiency gains are achieved legally and ethically, maintaining data accuracy and compliance with reporting standards. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible operations, which is crucial for maintaining trust with stakeholders and avoiding penalties. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing changes based solely on the efficiency study's recommendation without a compliance review is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of regulatory due diligence. Specifically, it risks non-compliance with data integrity regulations, which mandate accurate and reliable data for all operational and financial reporting. Furthermore, it could breach internal GXO logistics policies designed to safeguard data and ensure regulatory adherence, potentially leading to fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the efficiency study's findings entirely due to fear of regulatory complexity, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and a failure to pursue legitimate operational improvements. It can lead to a competitive disadvantage and missed opportunities for cost savings and service enhancements, while still not guaranteeing compliance if existing processes are already flawed. The professional reasoning process for similar situation should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the findings of any study or proposal. Second, identify all relevant internal policies and external regulations that might be impacted. Third, conduct a detailed risk assessment, evaluating potential compliance issues and their consequences. Fourth, consult with legal and compliance departments to validate proposed actions. Finally, implement changes only after a comprehensive review and approval process, ensuring that efficiency and compliance are integrated, not treated as competing priorities. Question 4. Investigation of a new company policy that streamlines the loading process by reducing pre-shipment inspections for certain high-volume, low-risk goods. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliance approach for GXO logistics? Option A. Delegate the decision-making authority for the policy to the operational managers responsible for meeting delivery targets, trusting their judgment on regulatory matters. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the streamlined policy against all applicable transportation, safety, and environmental regulations, and consult with legal counsel to confirm compliance before implementation. Option C. Implement the new policy immediately to improve efficiency and address any potential regulatory issues that may arise on a case-by-case basis after operations have commenced. Option D. Rely on the historical low incident rate for these goods to justify the reduction in inspections, assuming current regulations will not be violated. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the streamlined policy against all applicable transportation, safety, and environmental regulations, and consult with legal counsel to confirm compliance before implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. A logistics company, like GXO, operates within a complex web of regulations governing safety, environmental impact, and labor practices. The pressure to meet delivery targets can create a temptation to overlook or minimize adherence to these rules, especially when faced with resource constraints or tight deadlines. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach, which involves a thorough review of internal procedures against current regulatory requirements and seeking expert clarification when in doubt, represents best professional practice. This proactive stance ensures that GXO Logistics remains compliant with all applicable laws and guidelines, thereby mitigating legal risks, protecting its reputation, and upholding its ethical responsibilities. It demonstrates a commitment to a culture of compliance, which is paramount in the logistics industry where safety and environmental stewardship are critical. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings by deferring necessary safety upgrades, for example, would represent a significant regulatory failure. This could violate specific health and safety legislation, leading to potential fines, operational disruptions, and severe consequences in the event of an accident. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on outdated training materials that no longer reflect current environmental regulations, would expose the company to risks of noncompliance with environmental protection laws, potentially resulting in penalties and damage to its environmental credentials. Furthermore, an approach that ignores employee feedback regarding potential safety hazards under the guise of maintaining delivery schedules would breach labor laws and ethical duties of care, creating a dangerous work environment and undermining employee trust. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of all relevant regulatory frameworks. This involves regular training, staying updated on legislative changes, and establishing robust internal audit processes. When faced with a dilemma, the professional should first identify the specific regulations at play. Then, they should assess the potential impact of different courses of action on compliance, safety, environmental protection, and employee well-being. Seeking advice from legal counsel or compliance officers is crucial when uncertainty exists. The ultimate decision should always prioritize adherence to the law and ethical principles, even if it incurs short-term costs or delays. Question 5. What factors determine the most effective strategy for GXO Logistics to maintain ongoing regulatory compliance in its data handling and operational processes across diverse international markets? Option A. The extent to which GXO Logistics proactively monitors global regulatory changes, integrates compliance into its technology and operational frameworks, and fosters a culture of compliance awareness across all departments. Option B. The complete delegation of all regulatory compliance responsibilities to external legal counsel and consultants without establishing internal oversight or integration into core business functions. Option C. The focus on addressing immediate operational efficiency needs without significant consideration for potential future regulatory shifts or international data transfer laws. Option D. The primary reliance on the internal IT department to interpret and implement all data privacy and security regulations based on their technical understanding of systems. The correct answer is A. The extent to which GXO Logistics proactively monitors global regulatory changes, integrates compliance into its technology and operational frameworks, and fosters a culture of compliance awareness across all departments. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in logistics and supply chain operations, ensuring compliance with evolving regulatory frameworks, specifically concerning data privacy and security. GXO Logistics, as a global provider of logistics solutions, handles sensitive customer and operational data. The challenge lies in proactively identifying and adapting to new regulations that could impact data handling, storage, and transmission across different jurisdictions where GXO operates. This requires a robust internal compliance program that goes beyond mere reactive adherence. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated strategy for regulatory compliance. This involves continuous monitoring of regulatory landscapes, engaging with legal and compliance experts, and embedding compliance considerations into operational processes and technology infrastructure. This approach represents best professional practice because it minimizes the risk of non-compliance, which can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. It aligns with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive data and maintain customer trust. An incorrect approach that relies solely on internal IT teams to interpret and implement regulations is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the specialized legal and regulatory expertise required for accurate interpretation and application. It also overlooks the potential for conflicts of interest and the lack of a holistic compliance perspective. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on immediate operational needs without considering future regulatory changes, demonstrates a short-sighted view that is prone to future noncompliance. This reactive stance is inefficient and increases the likelihood of costly remediation efforts. Finally, an approach that delegates compliance entirely to external consultants without establishing internal oversight and integration is also flawed. While external expertise is valuable, ultimate responsibility for compliance rests with the organization, and a lack of internal ownership can lead to misinterpretations or a failure to embed compliance into the company's culture and operations. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory environment, fosters cross-functional collaboration between legal, compliance, IT, and operations teams, and integrates compliance into the strategic planning and day-to-day execution of business activities. This involves establishing clear policies, providing regular training, conducting internal audits, and maintaining open communication channels with regulatory bodies where appropriate. Question 6. When evaluating a driver's log data and noticing a pattern of consistently exceeding the maximum allowable driving and working hours under the Working Time Directive, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for a logistics supervisor at GXO Logistics? Option A. Investigate the driver's log data to understand the root cause of the exceedances, review scheduling and route planning for potential inefficiencies, and implement adjustments to ensure future compliance with working hour regulations. Option B. Instruct the driver to continue as normal to meet delivery schedules, assuming the exceedances are minor and unlikely to be detected by authorities. Option C. Ignore the data as it is likely an anomaly or a minor issue that will resolve itself without intervention. Option D. Advise the driver to manually adjust their log entries to reflect compliant hours, even if it means misrepresenting their actual working time. The correct answer is A. Investigate the driver's log data to understand the root cause of the exceedances, review scheduling and route planning for potential inefficiencies, and implement adjustments to ensure future compliance with working hour regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in logistics operations, or the pressure to meet delivery deadlines can sometimes conflict with the imperative to adhere to regulatory compliance, particularly concerning driver working hours. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with legal and ethical obligations to ensure driver safety and prevent regulatory breaches. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate risks associated with non-compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the relevant regulatory framework, specifically the Working Time Directive, WTD in the UK, which governs drivers' hours. By proactively identifying potential breaches and implementing corrective actions, the company demonstrates a commitment to legal compliance, driver welfare, and operational integrity. This approach mitigates legal penalties, reputational damage, and ensures a safer working environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting delivery targets without considering driver hours fails to acknowledge the legal and ethical responsibilities. This can lead to driver fatigue, increased accident risk, and significant penalties for the company under the WTD. Another incorrect approach that involves falsifying records is a direct violation of regulatory requirements and constitutes fraud, carrying severe legal consequences and ethical condemnation. Ignoring the issue or hoping it resolves itself is also a failure, as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and proactive risk management, leaving the company exposed to potential enforcement actions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of applicable regulations. When faced with a potential conflict between operational demands and compliance, the process should involve 1. Identifying the specific regulatory requirements, e.g., WTD limits. 2. Assessing the operational impact and potential for non-compliance. 3. Exploring all compliance solutions to meet operational needs, which may involve route optimization, resource allocation, or communication with clients about realistic timelines. 4. If non-compliance is unavoidable under current conditions, escalating the issue to management to seek resources or policy adjustments, rather than resorting to non-compliant practices. 5. Documenting all assessments and decisions. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of regulatory obligations to ensure operational integrity. Considering the GXO logistics hiring assessment tests focus on regulatory compliance, which of the following actions best demonstrates a proactive and compliant approach to managing customer data within the logistics operations? Option A. Relying on the existing general IT security protocols to govern all customer data, assuming they are sufficient for current regulatory demands. Option B. Assigning the sole responsibility for data compliance to the IT department, with minimal input from operational or legal teams. Option C. Prioritizing the reduction of data storage costs by deleting older customer records without a clear policy or risk assessment regarding retention periods. Option D. Implementing a mandatory, recurring training program for all employees on data privacy regulations and company-specific data handling policies, coupled with a regular audit of data access logs and storage practices. Correct answer is D. Implementing a mandatory, recurring training program for all employees on data privacy regulations and company-specific data handling policies, coupled with a regular audit of data access logs and storage practices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning the handling of sensitive customer data within the logistics sector. The core difficulty lies in identifying and mitigating potential risks associated with data sharing and storage, ensuring that all practices align with the governing regulatory framework for data protection. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive review of existing data handling procedures against the specific requirements of the GXO logistics hiring assessment tests regulatory framework. This proactive stance ensures that any identified gaps are addressed through targeted training and policy updates, thereby minimizing the risk of non-compliance and protecting customer data. This aligns with the ethical obligation to safeguard information and the regulatory imperative to maintain robust data protection measures. An incorrect approach that involves assuming existing protocols are sufficient without verification fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of regulations and the potential for evolving risks. This oversight can lead to regulatory breaches, fines, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost-cutting measures without considering compliance implications, directly contravenes the principle that regulatory adherence is a non-negotiable aspect of business operations. This can result in significant penalties and legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach, which delegates the entire responsibility to a single department without cross-functional oversight, creates a siloed approach to compliance, increasing the likelihood of overlooked risks and inconsistent application of policies across the organization. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all relevant laws, guidelines, and internal policies. Next, a risk assessment should be conducted to pinpoint potential areas of noncompliance. Based on this assessment, a strategic plan should be developed that includes clear objectives, actionable steps, assigned responsibilities, and timelines for implementation and review. Regular monitoring and auditing are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to any changes in the regulatory environment or business operations. Question 8. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in inventory reconciliation procedures, suggesting a possible but unconfirmed risk of stock obsolescence. What is the most appropriate immediate next step? Option A. Immediately implement a company-wide policy requiring a full physical stocktake of all inventory items. Option B. Inform all department heads that a significant risk of stock obsolescence has been identified and instruct them to halt all new inventory orders. Option C. File a formal report with the board of directors detailing the potential risk of obsolescence without conducting any further internal investigation. Option D. Initiate a detailed review of the inventory reconciliation process to identify the root cause of the discrepancy and assess the extent of potential obsolescence. The correct answer is D. Initiate a detailed review of the inventory reconciliation process to identify the root cause of the discrepancy and assess the extent of potential obsolescence. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the audit findings, while identifying potential risks, are not yet definitive. The challenge lies in balancing the need for proactive risk mitigation with the potential for overreaction or misallocation of resources based on preliminary information. It requires careful judgment to determine the appropriate level of response without compromising operational efficiency or creating unnecessary alarm. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based response. This aligns with best professional practices in risk management, which emphasize thorough investigation and validation before implementing significant changes. Specifically, it adheres to principles of due diligence and responsible governance by ensuring that actions taken are proportionate to the identified risks and supported by concrete evidence. This approach avoids premature conclusions and allows for more targeted and effective resolution. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing costly and disruptive control enhancements based solely on the initial audit findings. This fails to meet the standard of proportionality in risk management. It can lead to wasted resources, employee frustration, and a perception of an overly bureaucratic environment, potentially violating principles of efficient operations and good management practice. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the audit findings entirely without further investigation, assuming they are minor or inconsequential. This represents a significant failure in risk oversight and due diligence. It could lead to the overlooking of genuine threats, potentially exposing the organization to financial losses, reputational damage, or regulatory noncompliance, thereby violating ethical obligations to protect the company's interests. A third incorrect approach is to escalate the findings to senior management without any initial assessment or attempt to understand the root cause. This can create unnecessary panic and burden senior leadership with issues that might be resolved at a lower level. It demonstrates a lack of initiative and an abdication of responsibility for initial problem solving, which is a core aspect of professional conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the audit findings and their potential implications. Second, conduct a preliminary investigation to validate the findings and gather more context. Third, assess the severity and likelihood of the identified risks. Fourth, develop a proportionate response plan, which may involve further investigation, immediate corrective actions, or monitoring. Finally, communicate findings and proposed actions clearly and concisely to relevant stakeholders, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 9. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new, high-volume delivery route has been established with a tight deadline for implementation. Which of the following approaches best ensures that potential operational, safety, and compliance risks associated with this new route are adequately identified and managed? Option A. Assign a junior logistics coordinator to quickly review the route plan and flag any obvious concerns without formal risk evaluation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving key stakeholders from operations, safety, and compliance departments to identify potential hazards, evaluate their likelihood and impact, and develop specific mitigation strategies before the route is fully operational. Option C. Rely on the experience of the operations manager who has overseen similar routes in the past to identify and address any foreseeable issues. Option D. Prioritize immediate route implementation to meet the deadline, with a plan to address any identified risks on an ad hoc basis as they arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving key stakeholders from operations, safety, and compliance departments to identify potential hazards, evaluate their likelihood and impact, and develop specific mitigation strategies before the route is fully operational. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for operational efficiency with the imperative to identify and mitigate potential risks that could impact GXO logistics operations, reputation, and compliance. The pressure to deliver results quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts in risk assessment, which is a critical failure. Careful judgment is required to ensure that risk assessment is thorough, systematic, and integrated into decision-making processes, rather than being an afterthought. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it emphasizes a proactive and systematic identification of potential risks, followed by an evaluation of their likelihood and impact. This aligns with the principles of robust risk management frameworks, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by industry best practices and regulatory expectations for logistics companies. By documenting identified risks and developing mitigation strategies, GXO Logistics demonstrates due diligence, enhances operational resilience, and supports informed strategic decision-making. This systematic approach helps prevent unforeseen disruptions and ensures compliance with relevant operational standards and potentially safety regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate operational needs without a structured risk assessment fails to identify potential vulnerabilities. This could lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, or even regulatory noncompliance if a critical risk materializes. For instance, overlooking the risk of equipment failure due to inadequate maintenance or the risk of data breaches due to insufficient cybersecurity measures would be a direct failure in professional duty and could contravene implied operational standards. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experience without a formal assessment is also professionally unacceptable. While experience is valuable, it is not a substitute for a structured risk assessment process. This approach is prone to bias and may miss emerging or novel risks. It fails to provide a defensible basis for risk mitigation decisions and could lead to a false sense of security. A third incorrect approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to junior staff without adequate oversight or training is also problematic. This can lead to incomplete assessments, misinterpretation of findings, or a lack of understanding of the broader business context. It undermines the integrity of the risk assessment process and can result in critical risks being overlooked or underestimated. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's risk appetite, the establishment of a defined risk assessment methodology, and the integration of risk management into all levels of operations. Professionals should be trained to identify, analyze, evaluate, and treat risks systematically. When faced with time pressures, it is crucial to prioritize the most critical risks and ensure that even a streamlined assessment is still comprehensive enough to address significant potential threats. Documentation and regular review of risk assessment are also essential components of best practice. Question 10. The risk matrix shows several potential operational disruptions for GXO logistics, including a moderate likelihood of equipment failure with high impact, a high likelihood of minor delivery delays with moderate impact, and a low likelihood of a major security breach with very high impact. Which approach best guides the immediate allocation of resources for mitigation? Option A. Allocate resources to mitigate the high likelihood, moderate impact delivery delays, as these are the most frequent issues affecting customer satisfaction. Option B. Focus immediate mitigation efforts on the moderate likelihood, high impact equipment failure, as it presents a significant threat that can be addressed with targeted interventions. Option C. Distribute resources equally across all identified risks to ensure comprehensive coverage, irrespective of their position on the matrix. Option D. Prioritize addressing the low likelihood, very high impact security breach, as its potential consequences are the most severe, regardless of its probability. The correct answer is B. Focus immediate mitigation efforts on the moderate likelihood, high impact equipment failure, as it presents a significant threat that can be addressed with targeted interventions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in prioritizing risk mitigation efforts within a logistics operation. The risk matrix, a common tool for visualizing risk likelihood and impact, highlights several potential issues. The professional challenge lies in moving beyond a simple visual representation to a nuanced understanding of how to allocate limited resources effectively. It requires a judgment call that balances the severity of potential consequences with the probability of occurrence, while also considering operational realities and strategic objectives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of risks based on their position within the matrix, specifically focusing on those categorized as high likelihood and high impact. This aligns with best professional practice in risk management, which dictates that resources should be concentrated on the most significant threats to prevent severe disruptions, financial losses, or reputational damage. This proactive stance is often implicitly or explicitly supported by operational guidelines and a general duty of care expected in logistics, aiming to ensure business continuity and stakeholder safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on risks with the highest potential impact, regardless of their likelihood. This fails to acknowledge that extremely rare events, even if catastrophic, might not warrant the same immediate resource allocation as more frequent, albeit less severe, risks that could cumulatively cause significant disruption. This can lead to inefficient resource deployment and a neglect of more probable threats. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize risks based on their visibility or the loudest stakeholder complaints, rather than their objective assessment on the risk matrix. This can lead to reactive decision-making, diverting attention and resources from more critical, but less vocalized risks. It undermines the integrity of the risk assessment process and can result in overlooking systemic issues. A third incorrect approach is to ignore risks that fall into the lower quadrants of the matrix, even if they represent emerging threats or have a cumulative effect. While these may not be immediate high priorities, a complete disregard can lead to unforeseen problems escalating over time, demonstrating a lack of foresight and comprehensive risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the context of the risk matrix. This involves identifying the criteria used for likelihood and impact. The next step is to analyze the distribution of risks. The most effective decision-making process involves prioritizing risks that fall into the high likelihood, high impact quadrant for immediate mitigation. For other risks, a tiered approach should be adopted, considering their potential for escalation, interdependencies, and alignment with strategic business objectives. Regular review and reassessment are crucial to adapt to changing circumstances. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that GXO Logistics is experiencing an increase in delivery delays attributed to unforeseen operational disruptions. To enhance resilience and minimize future impacts, which of the following approaches to risk assessment would be most effective in identifying and preparing for potential disruptions? Option A. Assigning the entire risk assessment responsibility to the IT department, assuming all major disruptions will be technology-related. Option B. Prioritizing the mitigation of only those risks that have a high probability of occurring, regardless of their potential impact on operations. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive review of all potential failure points across the supply chain, including external factors like weather and infrastructure, and internal factors such as equipment and labor to develop proactive mitigation strategies. Option D, relying solely on an analysis of past delivery delays and their root causes to inform future risk preparedness. The correct answer is C, conducting a comprehensive review of all potential failure points across the supply chain, including external factors like weather and infrastructure, and internal factors such as equipment and labor, to develop proactive mitigation strategies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in risk assessment by requiring the identification of potential operational disruptions in a logistics environment. The professional challenge lies in anticipating unforeseen events that could impact service delivery, supply chain integrity, and ultimately, customer satisfaction and financial performance. A thorough risk assessment demands foresight, an understanding of interconnected systems, and the ability to prioritize potential threats based on their likelihood and impact. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and proactive identification of potential failure points within the logistics process. This includes considering external factors like weather, infrastructure issues, and supplier reliability, as well as internal factors such as equipment malfunction, labor availability, and IT system failures. By mapping these potential risks, a logistics company can develop mitigation strategies, contingency plans, and business continuity measures. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring operational resilience and minimizing the impact of disruption, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and financial stability. Regulatory frameworks often mandate such proactive risk management to ensure service continuity and compliance with contractual obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on historical data and past incidents. While historical data is valuable, it does not account for novel or emerging risks, such as new technological vulnerabilities, geopolitical shifts, or unprecedented environmental events. Relying exclusively on the past can lead to a false sense of security and leave the organization unprepared for future disruptions. This approach fails to meet the proactive and forward-looking requirements of effective risk management. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss risks that have a low probability of occurring, regardless of their potential impact. In logistics, even a low probability event, such as a major port closure or a widespread cyber attack, could have catastrophic consequences. A robust risk assessment must consider both the likelihood and the severity of potential impacts, prioritizing mitigation efforts for high impact, even if low probability risks. This approach neglects the principle of worst-case scenario planning, crucial for critical infrastructure. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire risk assessment process to a single department without cross-functional input. Logistics operations are complex and involve multiple departments: operations, IT, procurement, HR, etc. A siloed approach will likely miss critical interdependencies and potential risks that span across different functional areas. Effective risk assessment requires collaboration and diverse perspectives to capture a comprehensive view of potential vulnerabilities. This fails to acknowledge the interconnected nature of modern logistics operations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by adopting a structured methodology that includes 1. Risk identification, brainstorming and documenting all potential threats and vulnerabilities across all operational areas. 2. Risk analysis, evaluating the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 3. Risk evaluation, prioritizing risks based on their significance. 4. Risk treatment, developing and implementing strategies to mitigate, transfer, avoid, or accept risks. 5. Risk monitoring and review, continuously reviewing and updating the risk assessment as circumstances change. This iterative process ensures that the organization remains adaptable and resilient in the face of evolving challenges. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal a recurring pattern of minor cosmetic defects on a specific product line being prepared for shipment. The warehouse supervisor, under pressure to meet daily dispatch targets, suggests expediting the final inspection process for this line by reducing the sample size for visual checks, arguing that the defects are superficial and unlikely to impact functionality. Option A. Immediately implement the supervisor's suggestion to reduce the sample size for the affected product line to meet dispatch targets, with a plan to address the defects later. Option B. Instruct the quality control team to focus only on functional defects and disregard cosmetic imperfections for this product line to improve efficiency. Option C. Escalate the issue to senior management, requesting additional resources for a more thorough inspection process, even if it means delaying shipments. Option D. Conduct a root cause analysis to identify why the defects are occurring and implement corrective actions to address the underlying issues before altering inspection protocols. The correct answer is D. Conduct a root cause analysis to identify why the defects are occurring and implement corrective actions to address the underlying issues before altering inspection protocols. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with adherence to established quality control protocols, which are often mandated by regulatory bodies to ensure safety, compliance, and customer satisfaction. The pressure to meet delivery targets can create a temptation to bypass or expedite certain checks, potentially leading to significant risks. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the deviation and implement a sustainable solution rather than a superficial fix. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough investigation into the underlying causes of the quality control failures. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk management, which are fundamental in logistics operations. By engaging relevant stakeholders and implementing corrective actions based on root cause analysis, the company demonstrates a commitment to upholding its quality standards and regulatory obligations. This proactive stance prevents recurrence and reinforces a culture of quality. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate rectification without understanding the cause is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to recurring issues and a failure to address systemic weaknesses. For instance, simply re-inspecting the affected batch without investigating why the initial inspection failed to catch the defect ignores the possibility of flawed inspection procedures, inadequate training, or equipment malfunction. This constitutes a regulatory failure by not ensuring that processes are robust enough to consistently meet quality standards, and an ethical failure by potentially allowing substandard products to proceed. Another incorrect approach that involves blaming individual staff members without a comprehensive review of processes and training is also professionally unsound. This fosters a negative work environment and fails to address potential systemic issues. It is a regulatory failure because it does not ensure that the overall quality management system is effective, and an ethical failure as it unfairly targets individuals without due process or a holistic understanding of contributing factors. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and its impact. Second, gather all relevant data and involve all affected parties. Third, conduct a thorough root cause analysis to understand why the deviation occurred. Fourth, develop and implement targeted corrective and preventive actions. Finally, monitor the effectiveness of these actions and continuously refine processes to ensure ongoing compliance and quality. This systematic approach ensures that solutions are effective, sustainable, and aligned with regulatory and ethical expectations. Question 13. Consider a scenario where a hiring manager for GXO Logistics is under pressure to fill several critical warehouse operative roles quickly. They have a pool of candidates who have completed the GXO Logistics hiring assessment test. The manager believes they can identify the best candidates by reviewing the assessment results alongside their personal knowledge of the candidate's previous work experience and perceived fit for the team, even if this means prioritizing certain candidates over others who scored similarly on the test but lack the manager's personal endorsement. What is the most appropriate approach to selecting candidates in this situation? Option A. Focus on the candidates who are most familiar to the hiring manager, as their prior interactions provide a more reliable indicator of future performance than the standardized assessment. Option B. Use personal knowledge and perceived fit as the primary criteria for selection, supplementing the assessment results only to confirm the manager's initial impressions. Option C. Strictly adhere to the scoring and ranking derived from the GXO Logistics hiring assessment test, using it as the primary determinant for candidate selection, and only considering personal knowledge for tie-breaking situations or to gather further information for candidates who narrowly miss the cutoff. Option D. Adjust the scoring of the assessment results based on the manager's subjective evaluation of each candidate's potential, giving more weight to candidates who appear to have a stronger personal connection or perceived cultural alignment. Correct answer is C. Strictly adhere to the scoring and ranking derived from the GXO Logistics Hiring Assessment Test, using it as the primary determinant for candidate selection, and only considering personal knowledge for tie-breaking situations or to gather further information for candidates who narrowly missed the cutoff. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to streamline operations and the regulatory obligation to ensure fair and transparent hiring practices. The pressure to fill positions quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the assessment process. Careful judgment is required to balance efficiency with compliance and ethical considerations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the GXO Logistics Hiring Assessment Test's established framework. This involves a thorough understanding and application of the assessment's design, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated against the same objective criteria. This aligns with principles of fairness, equal opportunity, and data integrity, which are implicitly or explicitly mandated by most employment regulations and ethical guidelines governing hiring. By focusing on the skills and competencies the assessment is designed to measure, the company upholds its commitment to selecting the most qualified individuals, thereby minimizing the risk of discriminatory practices or legal challenges. An incorrect approach that involves deviating from the assessment's intended use, such as prioritizing candidates based on pre-existing relationships or perceived suitability without objective evaluation, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses the structured assessment process, potentially leading to biased hiring decisions and violating principles of equal opportunity. Such actions can expose the company to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a decline in employee morale. Another incorrect approach, such as altering the assessment criteria mid-process to accommodate a specific candidate, undermines the validity and reliability of the entire hiring assessment. This is a direct contravention of the principles of standardized testing and fair evaluation, leading to an inequitable process and potentially hiring individuals who do not meet the required standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to understanding and upholding the integrity of the hiring assessment. This includes 1. Clearly defining the objectives of the assessment and the criteria for success. 2. Ensuring all assessors are trained on the proper administration and evaluation of the assessment. 3. Maintaining strict adherence to the established assessment protocols for all candidates. And 4. Establishing a mechanism for reviewing and addressing any deviations or concerns regarding the assessment process to ensure fairness and compliance. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates a recurring pattern of customer delivery instructions, which include personal contact details and specific delivery preferences, being temporarily stored in unsecured shared spreadsheets by frontline staff to facilitate quick communication with drivers. While this practice aims to expedite deliveries, it raises concerns about potential unauthorized access and data misuse. Option A. Instruct frontline staff to cease using shared spreadsheets for delivery instructions and to rely solely on the existing, albeit slower, official dispatch system without providing an immediate alternative. Option B. Document the issue internally as a minor operational inefficiency and monitor its occurrence without immediate corrective action, assuming the risk of a breach is low. Option C. Advise frontline staff to encrypt the shared spreadsheets containing customer data before sharing them with drivers, assuming this adequately mitigates the risk. Option D. Immediately escalate the issue to the data protection officer and the compliance department for a formal review of data handling procedures, and to initiate a process for developing and implementing a secure, compliant alternative for sharing delivery instructions. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the issue to the data protection officer and the compliance department for a formal review of data handling procedures, and to initiate a process for developing and implementing a secure, compliant alternative for sharing delivery instructions. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive customer data within a logistics context. The need to balance speed of service with the imperative to protect personal information requires careful judgment and adherence to established protocols. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, documented, and compliant method for addressing the identified data handling issue. This involves immediate escalation to the appropriate internal department, e.g., data protection officer or compliance team, and a thorough review of existing procedures against relevant data protection regulations. This ensures that any remediation is not only effective, but also legally sound and auditable, minimizing the risk of future breaches and associated penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to data privacy principles and a proactive stance on risk management. An incorrect approach that involves disregarding the identified issue due to time constraints would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes data protection laws which mandate the secure and lawful processing of personal data. Such an action could lead to data breaches, unauthorized access, and misuse of information, resulting in severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to resolve the issue through informal, undocumented means, also poses regulatory risks. This lack of formal documentation makes it impossible to demonstrate compliance during an audit and could lead to inconsistent application of solutions, potentially creating new vulnerabilities or failing to address the root cause effectively. It bypasses established governance structures designed to ensure data protection. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying and understanding the nature of the operational issue. This is followed by an assessment of potential risks, including regulatory, financial, and reputational impacts. The next step involves consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. Based on this assessment, the professional should then identify and evaluate potential solutions, prioritizing those that are compliant, effective, and sustainable. Escalation to the appropriate authority or department is crucial when the issue falls outside the professional's direct remit or involves significant compliance implications. Finally, ensuring proper documentation and follow-up for any implemented solution is essential for accountability and continuous improvement. Question 15. The audit findings indicate a significant deviation in the documented procedure for handling customer data during the onboarding process, specifically concerning the verification of identity documents. This deviation has been attributed to a recent system update that altered the workflow without adequate retraining of frontline staff. The audit team has flagged this as a potential breach of data protection regulations. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate response to address these audit findings? Option A. Issue a directive to all frontline staff to revert to the previous, pre-update manual verification process for identity documents, pending a full investigation. Option B. Immediately halt all new customer onboarding until a comprehensive review of the system update and staff training materials is completed, and a revised, compliant process is implemented and verified. Option C. Escalate the findings to senior management and request that the IT department prioritize a rollback of the system update to restore the previous functionality. Option D. Implement a temporary, informal checklist for staff to manually cross-reference key data points from the new system with the original documents, while continuing the onboarding process as usual. Correct answer is B. Immediately halt all new customer onboarding until a comprehensive review of the system update and staff training materials is completed, and a revised, compliant process is implemented and verified. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational pressures and the long-term implications of noncompliance. The audit findings highlight a potential breakdown in the implementation of a critical process, requiring swift and effective remediation. Careful judgment is essential to balance the need for operational continuity with the imperative to address the identified risks and ensure adherence to regulatory standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, systematic, and documented investigation into the root cause of the implementation failure. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, which are fundamental in regulated environments. By engaging relevant stakeholders, including compliance and operational teams, and developing a corrective action plan with clear timelines and accountability, the organization demonstrates a commitment to rectifying the issue and preventing recurrence. This proactive and structured response minimizes the risk of further regulatory scrutiny, financial penalties, and reputational damage. It also fosters a culture of continuous improvement and accountability, An incorrect approach that focuses solely on superficial fixes without understanding the underlying issues is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to recurring problems and a false sense of security, potentially violating regulatory requirements for effective internal controls. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the audit findings due to perceived operational inconvenience, represents a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a disregard for compliance obligations and a willingness to operate with known risks, which can have significant legal and financial repercussions. Furthermore, an approach that involves blaming individual employees without a systemic review fails to address the root cause and can create a toxic work environment, undermining trust and collaboration, and potentially violating ethical employment practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the audit findings and their potential impact. This involves assessing the severity of the identified risks and their implications for regulatory compliance and business operations. Subsequently, professionals should gather information from all relevant parties to identify the root cause of the problem. This information should then be used to develop a range of potential solutions, evaluating each based on its effectiveness, feasibility, and compliance with regulatory requirements. The chosen solution should be implemented with clear ownership, timelines, and monitoring mechanisms. Finally, a post-implementation review should be conducted to ensure the effectiveness of the corrective actions and to identify any lessons learned for future processes. Question 16. Compliance review shows a pattern of drivers exceeding their mandated rest periods to meet tight delivery schedules, a practice observed by a warehouse operative during a routine check. The operative is aware that this practice, if widespread, could violate transportation safety regulations and GXO logistics internal policies on driver welfare and operational integrity. Option A. Directly confront the drivers observed to be exceeding rest periods, advising them to adhere to their schedules to avoid potential issues. Option B. Report the observed pattern of drivers exceeding rest periods to their direct supervisor and the company's compliance department, providing specific details of observations without making accusations. Option C. Ignore the observations, assuming that drivers are managing their time effectively and that the tight schedules are simply a part of the job. Option D. Discuss the observations with other warehouse colleagues to gauge their opinions and collectively decide on a course of action. The correct answer is B. Report the observed pattern of drivers exceeding rest periods to their direct supervisor and the company's compliance department, providing specific details of observations without making accusations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term imperative of maintaining ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet delivery targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential ethical breaches. Careful judgment is required to identify the conflict between business objectives and ethical obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the GXO Logistics Code of Conduct and relevant transportation regulations. By reporting the observed issue, the employee is upholding their responsibility to act with integrity and to prevent potential harm or regulatory violations. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and risk mitigation, which are fundamental to professional responsibility within the logistics industry. It aligns with the principle of doing the right thing, even when it might be inconvenient or unpopular. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the issue or hoping it resolves itself fails to address a potential safety or compliance risk. This inaction could lead to regulatory penalties, damage to GXO logistics reputation, and more importantly, compromise the safety of the public and other road users. It demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for established ethical guidelines and operational standards. Another incorrect approach, such as confronting the driver directly without proper procedure or authority, could escalate the situation unnecessarily, lead to defensiveness, and potentially create a hostile work environment. It bypasses established reporting channels designed to handle such matters objectively and effectively. This approach lacks professionalism and could undermine the integrity of the investigation process. A further incorrect approach, such as discussing the issue with colleagues without reporting it through official channels, constitutes gossip and can spread misinformation. It fails to address the problem constructively and can create a culture of distrust and non-accountability. This behavior undermines the company's commitment to a transparent and ethical workplace. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves 1. Identifying the ethical or regulatory concern. 2. Understanding the relevant company policies and external regulations. 3. Utilizing established reporting procedures to escalate the concern. 4. Maintaining objectivity and avoiding personal judgment or confrontation. 5. Cooperating with any subsequent investigation. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that a highly qualified candidate for a critical logistics management role previously worked for a direct competitor and was privy to sensitive operational strategies that could significantly benefit GXO Logistics. The hiring manager, eager to secure this candidate, is tempted to subtly probe the candidate during the interview about these proprietary strategies, believing this information would justify the hiring decision and provide a competitive edge. Option A. Inform the candidate that their previous employer's strategies are of interest but that direct discussion is not possible, and instead ask them to provide hypothetical examples of how they would improve GXO logistics operations without referencing specific competitor information. Option B. Directly ask the candidate to share specific details about their former employer's operational strategies, framing it as a way to understand their experience and how they can best contribute to GXO Logistics' competitive advantage. Option C. Politely decline to ask any questions related to the candidate's previous employer's proprietary strategies, and instead consult with the Human Resources Department and legal counsel to understand the ethical and legal implications of hiring an individual with such access, and to establish a clear protocol for managing any potential conflicts of interest or information handling concerns. Option D. Proceed with hiring the candidate based on their qualifications, assuming that any information they possess about their former employer is general knowledge and not a breach of confidentiality, and address any potential issues only if they arise. The correct answer is C. Politely decline to ask any questions related to the candidate's previous employer's proprietary strategies, and instead consult with the Human Resources Department and legal counsel to understand the ethical and legal implications of hiring an individual with such access, and to establish a clear protocol for managing any potential conflicts of interest or information handling concerns. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical obligation to maintain confidentiality and avoid conflicts of interest. The hiring manager is in a position of trust, and their actions must reflect integrity and adherence to company policy and ethical standards. The pressure to make a quick decision, coupled with the potential for personal gain or bias, necessitates a rigorous and principled approach. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes ethical conduct and adherence to established procedures. By seeking guidance from HR and the legal department, the hiring manager demonstrates a commitment to transparency, fairness, and compliance. This action upholds the integrity of the hiring process, protects the company from potential legal or reputational damage, and ensures that decisions are made based on merit rather than privileged information. It aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and ethical employment practices, which are implicitly expected in any professional setting, including logistics operations where trust and reliability are paramount. An incorrect approach involving directly asking the candidate for information about their previous employer's proprietary strategies would be a significant ethical and potentially legal failure. This action constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could be construed as industrial espionage or an attempt to gain an unfair competitive advantage, violating principles of fair competition and intellectual property rights. Another incorrect approach, such as using the information obtained through informal channels without verification or disclosure, would be a failure to act with due diligence and integrity. This could lead to biased decision-making, unfair treatment of other candidates, and potential legal repercussions for the company if the information is inaccurate or misused. Furthermore, ignoring the potential conflict of interest and proceeding with the hiring decision without addressing it would demonstrate a lack of professional responsibility and could undermine the trust placed in the hiring manager. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical dilemma. This involves recognizing the conflict between personal interests or perceived benefits and professional obligations. Next, they should gather relevant information, including company policies, legal guidelines, and ethical codes of conduct. The next step is to identify all possible courses of action and evaluate the potential consequences of each, considering both immediate and long-term impacts. Seeking advice from appropriate internal resources, such as HR or legal counsel, is crucial when faced with complex ethical situations. Finally, professionals should choose the course of action that best upholds ethical principles, legal requirements, and the company's best interests, and then document their decision-making process. Question 18. System analysis indicates a customer urgently requires access to detailed shipment tracking information for a high-value consignment. The request comes via an informal communication channel from an individual who claims to be an authorized representative of the client company, but their identity cannot be immediately verified through standard company protocols. The employee is aware that providing this information without proper verification could lead to a data breach, but delaying the response might jeopardize the customer relationship and the company's reputation for responsiveness. Option A. Forward the request to the IT department for an immediate security review before responding to the customer, even if this causes significant delay. Option B. Provide the requested tracking information immediately to ensure customer satisfaction and maintain a positive business relationship, assuming the individual is indeed authorized. Option C. Provide a limited amount of general tracking information that does not reveal sensitive details, while simultaneously initiating the formal verification process. Option D. Politely inform the individual that the request cannot be fulfilled through the current communication channel and explain the company's standard procedure for verifying such requests, which involves contacting the designated client account manager or using a secure portal. The correct answer is D. Politely inform the individual that the request cannot be fulfilled through the current communication channel and explain the company's standard procedure for verifying such requests, which involves contacting the designated client account manager or using a secure portal. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between immediate operational efficiency and long-term ethical compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security within a logistics context. The core dilemma lies in balancing the urgency of a customer request with the established protocols designed to protect sensitive information. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising either the company's integrity or the customer's trust. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established data handling policies and regulatory requirements. This represents best professional practice because it upholds the company's commitment to data security and privacy, which are critical in the logistics industry. By following the established procedure of verifying the request through official channels, the employee demonstrates integrity and a commitment to compliance. This aligns with general ethical principles of responsible data stewardship and, in a regulated environment like logistics, would likely be supported by specific data protection laws, e.g., GDPR if operating within the EU or similar frameworks in other jurisdictions, and company policies designed to prevent unauthorized access or disclosure of sensitive customer information. An incorrect approach that bypasses established verification procedures, even with good intentions, poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. Such an action could lead to a data breach, violating privacy regulations and potentially resulting in substantial fines and reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for established controls and a willingness to circumvent policy, which erodes trust within the organization and with clients. Another incorrect approach, such as outright refusal without offering an alternative or explanation, might be perceived as unhelpful and could damage the customer relationship, though it avoids the direct breach risk. However, it fails to demonstrate proactive problem-solving and adherence to customer service expectations within ethical boundaries. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies and relevant regulations. When faced with a request that seems to deviate from standard procedures, the professional should 1. Identify the potential risks and ethical considerations. 2. Consult relevant policies and guidelines. 3. If unsure, seek guidance from a supervisor or designated compliance officer. 4. Prioritize compliance and data security over immediate expediency. 5. Communicate clearly and professionally with the requester, explaining the process and any necessary steps. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical operational decision needs to be made within the next hour, but the required data resides in a restricted departmental database that you do not have direct access to. Your direct manager has urgently requested this information, stating it is vital for the decision. You know a colleague in the IT department who has the necessary access and is a personal friend. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Ask your IT friend to quickly pull the data for you, explaining the urgency, and assure them you will delete it immediately after use. Option B. Attempt to find publicly available information that might approximate the data needed, even if it is less precise, to provide a quick estimate. Option C. Inform your manager that you cannot access the data and that the decision will have to be made without it. Option D. Contact your direct manager to explain the situation and request guidance on the proper procedure for obtaining the data, or ask if they can authorize an expedited access request through the appropriate channels. The correct answer is D. Contact your direct manager to explain the situation and request guidance on the proper procedure for obtaining the data, or ask if they can authorize an expedited access request through the appropriate channels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a critical piece of information with the ethical obligation to protect confidential company data and the integrity of internal processes. The pressure to deliver results quickly can tempt individuals to bypass established protocols, leading to potential breaches of trust and regulatory noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension between urgency and ethical responsibility. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to GXO Logistics' established data handling policies and the relevant regulatory framework, which likely includes data privacy and security regulations. By escalating the request through the proper channels, the employee upholds the principle of data integrity and ensures that any access to sensitive information is authorized and documented. This aligns with ethical principles of honesty, accountability, and respect for confidentiality, and it mitigates the risk of unauthorized data disclosure, which could have significant legal and reputational consequences for GXO Logistics. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing the confidential data without authorization would be a direct violation of company policy and potentially data protection laws. This action demonstrates a disregard for established security protocols and an unethical breach of trust. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating or guessing the information, undermines the accuracy and reliability of GXO Logistics operations and could lead to flawed decision-making based on false data. This is also an ethical failure as it involves dishonesty. A third incorrect approach, such as delaying the response indefinitely without any attempt to find a legitimate solution, fails to meet professional obligations of diligence and responsiveness. Even if it avoids direct policy violation, it can still negatively impact business operations and stakeholder trust. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory considerations. This involves understanding company policies, relevant laws, and the potential consequences of various actions. When faced with a conflict between urgency and protocol, the professional should first attempt to find a solution within the established framework. If this is not immediately possible, escalation to a supervisor or relevant department is the next logical step. This ensures that the decision is made with appropriate oversight and that the company's interests and regulatory obligations are protected. Documenting the request and the steps taken is also crucial for accountability. Question 20. Assessment of a situation where a logistics coordinator notices a consistent pattern of slightly inflated delivery times being recorded in the system, which coincidentally aligns with the team's performance targets for on-time deliveries. The coordinator suspects this is an unintentional data entry error or a misunderstanding of a recent system update, but reporting it might negatively impact the team's perceived performance and their upcoming review. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Manually adjust the recorded delivery times to reflect what the coordinator believes is the accurate figure without consulting anyone to ensure the system data appears correct. Option B. Ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor issue that will resolve itself, to avoid jeopardizing the team's performance review. Option C. Discuss the discrepancy with team members and collectively decide to continue with the current data entry method if it benefits the team's performance metrics. Option D. Report the observed discrepancy to a supervisor, explaining the potential impact on performance metrics and requesting clarification on the correct data entry procedures. The correct answer is D. Report the observed discrepancy to a supervisor, explaining the potential impact on performance metrics and requesting clarification on the correct data entry procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and the ethical imperative to maintain data integrity and customer trust. Pressure to meet performance targets can incentivize shortcuts or the manipulation of data, which directly contravenes the principles of honesty and accuracy expected in logistics and supply chain operations. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising professional ethics or regulatory compliance. The correct approach, which involves reporting the discrepancy and seeking clarification on the data entry process, represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to established procedures. This aligns with the general ethical guidelines for business conduct, which emphasize accuracy, honesty, and accountability. In the context of a logistics assessment, this means ensuring that all reported metrics, such as delivery times or inventory accuracy, are factual and verifiable. Failure to do so could lead to misinformed business decisions, erode client confidence, and potentially violate contractual obligations or industry standards related to reporting. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking the discrepancy to avoid negative performance reviews is ethically unsound. It represents a failure to uphold the duty of care and accuracy expected of an employee. This could be seen as a form of data manipulation or misrepresentation, even if unintentional, which undermines the reliability of performance metrics. Such an action could lead to a false impression of operational efficiency, potentially masking underlying issues that require attention. Another incorrect approach, which is to unilaterally correct the data without understanding the root cause, is also professionally unacceptable. While seemingly proactive, it bypasses proper channels and could lead to further inaccuracies if the initial data entry was based on a misunderstanding of a new process or a genuine operational issue. This approach fails to address the systemic problem and could mask a training need or a process flaw, ultimately hindering long-term improvement. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the ethical conflict. Recognize the tension between personal or team performance and the integrity of data. 2. Consult relevant policies and procedures. Review company guidelines on data reporting accuracy and conflict resolution. 3. Seek clarification. If unsure about data or processes, ask supervisors or relevant departments for guidance. 4. Report discrepancies. Transparently communicate any identified inaccuracies through appropriate channels. 5. Propose solutions. If a process issue is identified, suggest improvements to prevent future errors. 6. Document actions. Keep records of communications and decisions made.